Yeah.
And he, because he experienced what it was like to be a man, and also the eternal nature of Mary, as far as Mary being his mother, his earthly mother, that he was blessed with those attributes to understand how. Not that he may not have already understood it, because he knows all things, right? But,
Jesus knows all things, did you say? Or the Father knows all things?
Now he does. Now he does.
So,
and he grew. I mean, it says that he grew, little by little throughout his life.
Just to clarify,
becoming more and more closer to the Father. And now, if you were to see the Father, you probably They would be one loving pair, our brother Jesus Christ and
so
the Father.
That's the clarification I was trying to get, and your explanation has slightly thrown me. So can I ask a follow-up question? Sure. When Jesus was upon the earth, was he God in any way?
We believe that he was he had his father in him, and in that side he was perfect.
So when you
perfect and probably perfect in spirit.
Okay,
well.
Again, I need a clarification. The Father, when he sent his Son,
yes.
Was he with the Son physically? Were they together in a divine union whilst he dwelt on earth? Or was the Father separate and distinct whilst the Son dwelt on the earth?
The Father was separate and distinct.
And do you know where he was? The Father?
The Father, yeah.
Where would he be? Would he be outside of creation or inside creation? When he sent the Son?
When he sent his Son? When he sent his Son, he could be with him spiritually,
but not physically. That's my point.
Physically. This is the temporal world.
So in other words,
he was in the spirit. He was
guiding him. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And all things. I also believe that all things were created spiritually before they were created physically. And, And that.
So you don't believe that God is temporal?
Oh, that the God is temporal?
Yeah.
I believe that I'm supposed to take care of the temple of God.
No, temporal.
Temporal meaning you don't believe that
temporal.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
God being in time.
Okay, so what was the question again?
Do you not believe that God is temporal?
No. God is eternal and everlasting.
But eternal. Sorry.
No, go on.
Eternal and everlasting. That doesn't negate time. Time is just a concept. This is how we measure or understand something that occurred at point A and the difference between something that occurred at point B. Yeah?
So God is one eternal round.
Sorry?
God is one eternal round, but yes, from beginning to end. He is my Father forever and ever, no matter what, and he loves all of his children.
So if he's the beginning and the end, how can he not be temporal? How can he be...
Oh, I didn't say he was temporal.
No. I am asking, you're saying he isn't temporal, but you're saying he's the beginning and the end. How can he be the beginning and the end and not be temporal?
I don't know, it's kind of like my ring.
What about your ring?
But my ring is one eternal round.
Well, it's not eternal though.
Well, I mean, it's as far as if you look at the connection, it goes.
The circumference of your ring.
Right. And
there are formulas that be able to work out what that distance is, and that distance can only be a finite. Yeah, it's not eternal. I mean, okay, you can go around it.
Well,
you can go around the square eternally.
Endless,
yeah,
right. That's what I mean.
Okay, so the Father is eternal.
Yes.
The Father isn't in time. He's outside of time, presumably, because you said that you don't believe that the Father can be in time.
Well, no. The Father can interject himself at any time.
You mean physically? Does he come down in the form of what?
He could come down if he wanted to.
Right. But he chose
probably,
not.
But because most of us don't have the body to withstand.
Yeah. But he sent his Son,
presence.
Right?
Yes.
And this Son is part of the Godhead, part of the divine nature?
Well, it's part of the eternal progression of our Father in
heaven. Okay, but I'm not talking about the progression. I'm talking about whether the Son is divine.
Yes.
Like the Father is divine.
The Son is divine like the Father is divine. But more in a
subordinate sense.
So in a subordinate sense.
Okay. So
because they have the same purpose.
Right.
Okay. So you're a subordinate.
So when God sent his
But also, like it mentions that all that the Father has,
The Son has.
The Son has.
Yeah, but
And it
before-
doesn't- and it
before we go to the
doesn't mean-
scripture-
it doesn't mean that Jesus is greater than Father in heaven. That doesn't mean that.
but he's subordinate, so therefore lesser than the Father, right?
And now has become like God. But still, we pray to the Father.
Okay.
We see Jesus is just the Savior.
I'm not so much talking about, because I'm trying to get my head around your concept. I'm not talking about what happens to Jesus after he leaves the earth and becomes one once again with the Father. Whilst Jesus was on the earth, was he divine like the Father is divine?
Yes. Halfway.
So, do you believe that God is a being that is divine in his nature from beginning to end, for eternity? Can he lose his divinity and become non-divine? No.
There's not.
No. And yet, when the Son was sent by the Father, you're claiming that when I asked you the question, was he divine like the Father was divine? You said yes and no. Do you believe that God can be both divine and not divine, such that it justifies the answer yes and no? Or is he always divine? There's never even a millisecond where he's not divine. Do you believe that?
At least in our time frame, as we know time, he
I appreciate that.
always is and
But
was.
remember, when the Son came down, he was in our time frame
Right.
for 33 years. So my question, I think, still stands. When he was here for 33 years, when I asked you the question, was he divine? You said yes and no. So
When I say completely divine, because I think that there's two things going on here. There's the Spirit. I think his Spirit was divine. I believe that his Spirit was divine and that his body was temporal.
And where was the Spirit? Where was the Spirit? Was it in the body itself, contained alongside the human nature? Where was his divine nature? Was it with the Father? How you doing?
The divine nature was with the Father. The fact that he was half the Father, he had half the Father's attributes in a growing, almost like embryonic way.
So if he had half,
Day by day,
he was growing.
he was moving in the direction of what his purpose and plan was.
Okay, but I asked you the question. Whilst he was on this earth, did he have the divine nature in his body? You said
Yes, he had the divine nature in his body.
But when I asked you, you said that it was with the Father. So again, you're confusing me. Was this divine nature, whilst he resided on the earth for 33 years, was it with him physically?
Yes, and it was.
And so it was separate from the Father, right? It couldn't have been with the Father.
Right.
Right. Okay. Good. So we got there finally.
Define the God nature. What is it?
I've got him defined that. So we can actually move on now.
All right.
And my next question invariably would be.
I'll leave you to it.
I didn't mean to come here to answer.
No. Look, we're having a little discussion here.
But I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And I appreciate your kindness.
Thanks. So, when Jesus came down on the earth for 33 years, he was divine. That divine nature was separate and distinct from the divine nature of the Father, who was outside of creation, right? The Father was outside. He sent his Son.
Right. I still believe that through Spirit they were tethered.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in his purpose and his feeling and.
Okay, so they had this sort of conduit. They had this connection, right?
Right.
That connection wouldn't have been severed.
Like a lot of the prophets. I'm assuming that.
So God sends his angel Gabriel to the prophets, and that's how the prophets communed with God, right? But my question here is as follows. What's your name, by the way?
Not just through Gabriel, but
or through inspiration.
Yeah, God talked to them directly. Through,
I got you. So, but the point here I'm trying to understand is you have the Son who was sent down. He's divine. So essentially, he is God. Because you wouldn't say he's 50% divine, right? Because then that takes me back to the original point I was making, which was, can God be not fully divine for even a millisecond and still be God?
Yeah. he's always going to be divine, no matter what.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's not even for a millisecond can he not be not divine, right?
Yeah.
Right.
In our time, yes, it's kind of like, in a way, maybe a little bit like, this is a temporal state. The world is a temporal state for us to
So whilst he
go
was
and caress and see if we will turn towards God and try to become more like Him.
Yep.
And
But the question now is our concept of God true or not? That's something very, very important. Because it could be that we have an understanding of God that's false, and we've persuaded ourselves or we've been educated to worship this false God. Like, for instance, the Hindus. They believe that God didn't just come down in the form of a man or a woman. He also came down in the form of a rat, a cow, a monkey, you name it, right? They have gods by the tons, as they say, right? So, but they would say, well, I believe that this God is true and should be worshipped. But we would say to them, well, that cannot be the case because God is the one who is not part of His creation. He is one that creation is dependent upon. He doesn't need to become a cow or a monkey or a rat and still be justified as God. Because a cow, monkey, a rat, and everything else in creation is dependent upon God.
we were created in the image of God, and I don't know. I don't. There's some things I don't understand. I don't understand how God became. I don't know if God in another time frame space was like His Father. I don't know about that. But what I do know is, and I have felt multiple times throughout my life, was that love of God testifying to me that we were made in the image of God, and that the charge to be more like God will bring us happiness as we're kind to one another, as we serve one another, as we lay down our lives for one another.
So going back to Jesus,
Yes.
He was on this earth for 33 years, fully divine. There's never a moment where He cannot be not divine, right? So would this?
It's kind of like a father is to the son here on the earth in a way. If you could just imagine that there was a father that was perfect and had a son that was
Perfect.
that was not perfect in every way, like his body, his spirit may be perfect.
But in His divinity, He was perfect, right?
Are you talking about Jesus or God?
Jesus.
In His actions, He was perfect.
Yeah. So in His actions, He was perfect. In His divine nature,
Yeah, and in His
was He perfect in His divine nature?
He was perfect in his spiritual divine nature.
But not in his
temporal body. Obviously, was
the temporal body. We would know that that's not divine because it's perishable, it's weak, it's
Right.
ineffectual, right? So we can exclude that.
and then the promise that he rose on the third day. We believe that too.
Okay, but that has nothing to do with the understanding that Jesus, in His divine nature, can never be anything other than divine. So just for instance, does that divine nature include His knowledge, His wisdom, His power? These are attributes, right, of God.
Right.
God is
Yeah.
all powerful. He's all knowledgeable.
He was not fully developed in some aspects.
No, fully developed in His bodily nature, we can understand that. I'm saying, was He fully developed? Did He have the fullness of God's attributes with Him in His divine nature whilst He was on this earth?
Physical and spiritual. When He resurrected, yes, but before then, no.
So before He resurrected in His divine nature, He wasn't God.
No, he was not. But He had been called. He'd been called, just like Jeremiah.
Okay, I'm not talking about who called Him God.
Yeah.
I want to understand your understanding. Before He resurrected, let's just say He resurrected at 32 years and 1 day, right? Prior to His resurrection, are you saying for 32 years He was not divine at all?
No, and I think that's where I think when my definition of divine, I think, is a little bit different than yours.
No, I'm not. Forget my definition, because I don't believe that God in his divine nature can become a man. I want to understand your concept, because I asked you before.
Well, the big distinction is never did I say that Jesus was Heavenly Father.
No, I didn't say that. I understand that.
Okay.
I remember I asked you before, Jesus in his divine nature, has he always been fully divine? And you said yes. I said, can there ever be a millisecond where he was not fully divine? You said no. And now you're saying, it seems like you've done a reverse. You said that, well, he was not divine until he was resurrected, which means that before he's resurrected, let me because I need clarification, otherwise I'm going to be going around in circles and I'm going to get confused. Before his resurrection and the point where he was born, for 32 years, let's just say, as an example, are you saying that he was not divine? He didn't have a divine nature?
No, I would say that he had a divine nature. But if the definition,
what is the
definition of divine attributes, and because from the beginning of his life to the end, yes, he was perfect
in his divine nature and his divine attributes.
In his divine attributes, less the physical body.
No, I'm talking about physical. Look, physical, it's a given, my friend.
Yes, I would say yes.
In his divine attributes.
In his divine attributes, he had.
He's all powerful. He's all knowledgeable. Whilst he's on this earth.
He was all. He grew little by little, but he had it within him.
Did he grow in his divine nature, in his divine attributes? Are you saying that he was 0% powerful when he was born, and then slowly but surely he became more and more powerful? Is that what you believe his divine nature was about?
I think as far as like his understanding of his divine nature, fully growing and progressing throughout his life. I mean, as an infant, because
was his divine nature at an infant stage, or was it his bodily nature that was at an infant stage?
I think just from the fact that he had half of his father in him, that was sufficient, but that there was still growth that was necessary.
There was growth in his divine nature. So you're saying that in his divine nature, his divine attributes, he was not fully God.
Because he was foreordained in the pre-existence, kind of like when in Jeremiah where it talks about before I formed in the belly, I knew thee.
Okay, but how does that answer the question about whether you believe he was, whilst on this earth, he grew in his divine nature? If he grew in his divine nature, then he couldn't have been divine to begin with, because it's either God is 100% divine or he's not divine. Have you heard of a 50% divine God? No. Why?
No, but it's still in the fact that coming into this world as a baby, having to learn how to walk.
Learn in what? Learn how? Learn in his bodily knowledge or in his divine knowledge?
In his bodily knowledge.
Okay, so you and me, we would agree 100%.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
In his bodily knowledge,
so I'd say spiritually, though, he was divine, 100%.
Right.
And with restrictions.
What restrictions were placed on his divine? How can God's 100% divinity be restricted?
Well, it's kind of like the blueprint, right? He had the blueprint.
So
the architectural makings of a child of God, but totally in his father's and mother's image.
Okay, so this didn't impinge upon his divinity, did it?
No.
Him being a man, he could have been a woman, hypothetically, but that wouldn't impinge, that wouldn't affect his divine nature, is what I'm trying to drive at here. He was, before his resurrection, 100% divine, as he was after his resurrection. So resurrection, it seems, has nothing to do with him being divine.
Well, it has everything to do with it, because at that point...
In what way?
Because
I thought he was 100% divine before his resurrection.
Speaking spiritually.
Yeah.
And then fulfilling the calling of his father.
Okay. So look,
And God could make that possible because God is
Do you believe God can be ignorant for a millisecond?
never.
No. So when Jesus in Mark 13:32 says that he does not know the hour, only the Father knows the hour,
True.
was he ignorant in his divine nature or his human nature?
Well, I think that's the part where he. So that was the part. I'm sorry.
Don't worry about it.
I lost my
This
thought for a
speaker's,
second.
speaker's corner for you, right? Go on, collect your thoughts.
No,
So was he ignorant in his divine nature or in his human nature? When he said, of that hour and of that day knoweth no man. No, not the angels which are in heaven, neither the Son, but the Father.
I think that the point with all of that is that his Father calls the shots. God the Father calls the shots.
In what ways? Does that mean that Jesus doesn't know the hour in his divine nature?
He doesn't know that part.
Okay, so therefore, how can this divine nature be 100% divine when there is a flaw in that divinity?
I wouldn't call it a flaw. I'd just say that that's the progression for him to become
Progression from what? Progression towards perfection?
towards perfection. And
Okay, so therefore he was imperfect, right?
Imperfect, yes.
So was he
in a sense,
imperfect in his divine nature? Is that what you're saying?
Spiritually, he was perfect. In his,
So spiritually you mean divine nature?
yes, spiritually, yes. But
Yes.
physically, and the whole combining of the spirit and the body, it's like the glove over the
Right.
and it wasn't the temporal body
Right.
passed, and then he
Yep.
was resurrected in full glory.
So
with this.
what, before his temporal body passed, and he claimed he does not know the hour, did he not know the hour in his physical or his spiritual divine nature?
Both.
Think about what you're saying here, because I've just asked you, making it categorically clear, can God be 99% divine with his 1% of non-divinity being that he did not know the hour? Can God in his divine nature not know something and still be 100% divine?
Christ would always submit to the Father.
I appreciate
And
that.
that's,
Because that's
and Christ will never be greater than his Father.
okay. No one's saying about him being greater, but he will be equal at least 100%, right? So when he didn't know,
But even with that, if the Lord were to say, "Hey, I'm going to send you somewhere," and you don't know when it's going to be, because I mean that's the one
okay.
thing.
So what you're arguing for is that he, in his divine nature, was ignorant. He was an ignorant God, because the Father said, "I'm going to send you, Son, and you don't need to know in your divine nature when the last hour will be." So how does that make him a God? Because you and I agreed from the beginning,
Yeah,
a God who is 99% claimed to be divine cannot be divine. He has to be 100% divine all the time.
But I don't believe that he would have to be 100%
Divine?
No. I don't think it would make him any less divine with him not knowing the hour or the day that he returns.
So you don't believe that he's all knowledgeable, that him being all knowledgeable is not a condition of him being God,
in all things except for that.
except for that. What about when he was walking towards the fig tree and he found that the fig tree wasn't in season, so he cursed it and it withered and died? How could he not have known whether the fig tree was in season or not?
I'm not as
That's in Luke
Yeah.
2:52, right? Where he says that he saw the fig tree, he wanted to go and dine from it. He walked and he found that it wasn't in season, so he cursed it and it withered and died. I'm not so much asking about the cursing bit. I'm asking about how is it that he could not have known that a fig tree was not or was in season?
that part. I don't know. I'd have to go research because
Okay, no problem.
that's one of the. That's
So
one of the-
hypothetically, if it is true, would that be another thing that he could not have known in his divine nature? And would you not have a problem with that? Or would you have a problem with that?
I wouldn't have a problem with him is because, like I said, the fulfilling the Masonic role to bring to pass. You know, it was a growth thing. But yes, as far as like him being equal to God the Father
In terms of his knowledge, you mean?
in terms of his knowledge, because it does say that he grew.
In wisdom and in stature.
Yes.
So what about
It was a pathway.
Yeah.
It was a.
what about his attribute of power? I mean, we've figured out that you believe that God the Father, a portion of him was ignorant, in that portion being Jesus, right? You don't have a problem with that.
Yeah. I don't have a problem with, and I know a lot of my Christian friends would probably have.
No problem. What about in terms of God's power? Do you believe that the Son was equal to the Father in his attribute of power?
I think that anything that he would have wanted to have happen could have happened.
Right.
I think that the restraint of
Right.
even being crucified on the
Right.
cross and not at that moment saying, you know, I command all of you to die, or all of you that did this to me to die. I think he could have got himself out of it, but he chose not to, because that's the kind of love that he saw and he felt and knew from his divine calling.
Do you find from Jesus' lips him teaching the Trinity? That there is the Father who is in heaven, that there is the Son who is this man God, and there is the Holy Spirit. Do you find that as a concept clearly taught by Jesus? Clearly taught?
Clearly taught.
Yeah.
For those that want to understand and take the time to study that, but it's definitely misinterpreted, I believe, fully.
Do you believe, remember I asked you at the beginning of our conversation that the purpose of all human beings is to worship God, and therefore it would be necessary to know who this God is so that we can appreciate who we're worshipping?
I think our purpose is to come unto God, and
By
that
knowing-
means, and that means worship as well.
Yes, brilliant.
And
So-
to become like Him.
So does that mean in order to become like him, we should know who he is before we can try and become like him, right? Sure. So the most important purpose for all human beings is to know who this God is so that we can fulfill our purpose of being like him, right?
Right.
So,
Because all the Ten Commandments, teach us really two things. That
God is one.
that Christ summarized in the two great commandments.
Yeah, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind,
and
love thy neighbor.
as thyself.
But what was the first commandment? When he was asked, "Oh, good teacher, what is the first commandment?" What was Jesus' response?
Wasn't it? I love the.
No, that was the greatest commandment. What was the first commandment?
I don't know. Help remind
Come
me.
on,
this.
man.
No, I know.
It must be it's the cold. It's the British cold, right?
Well, and I'm also on a different time zone. So anyway.
Okay, no worries. Okay. So, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one.
What's that?
Hear, O Israel, the Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Right? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. Right? Do not worship the Lord your God in the form of graven images. Right?
I don't worship.
I know. I'm not
saints
saying that you do.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that you worship graven images. But the point here is that our purpose in life is defined by the most important information that God would give mankind in order for us to fulfill that purpose we just agreed upon. So we know it makes sense that the first commandment is the nature of God. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. You know, the Lord your God is a jealous God, right? Meaning, don't worship alongside God
Right.
other deities like Baal, this person, that person, etc. Right? Because that would be a crime against God. That would be the greatest blasphemy. So for a Muslim, our understanding is that the prophets and messengers, all of them, they came with the most important message, which was the concept of God, who God is and how to worship him so that we can become one with him, if you will. Right? And so Moses, Noah, all the prophets of God, they taught a clear concept of God. The only point at which I feel things break down is when the Trinitarians come along and say that Jesus, who's part of that long line of prophets and messengers through the line of Isaac, he comes along and says, well, you children of Israel almost got it right. You guys have been taught that God can never become a man, but alas, I'm sorry to tell you that actually God can become a man. I am that God-man. I have that divinity in me, right? Little wonder the children of Israel, if Jesus said this, rejected him. Now, for a Muslim, our consistency of narrative is very, very important because truth should be so clear from God, not something that is obscure or mysterious, particularly when it's talking about God. our understanding is that Jesus wouldn't have taught mankind anything other than what his fellow prophets and messengers taught, which was, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul." We believe that the reason why the Christians strayed from the true path that Jesus taught was one man, a man who never met Jesus, who's walking down the road of Damascus. He claims, having not met Jesus, to have heard a voice and seen a light. And he claims that this was Jesus. This man's name was Saint Paul. According to the book of Acts, he was a persecutor of the followers of Jesus.
Right.
So imagine a man who's a sinner, he hasn't repented, makes a claim to the disciples who had lived and been taught by one of the great messengers of God, right? Who was a Jew himself, from the children of Israel, following the Judaic law, would have circumcised, would have kept away from drinking alcohol, eating pig, etc. And this man suddenly comes along.
He did say that he did drink wine.
Yeah,
But,
okay.
but that was
That would have been a more spiritual.
Probably half the population wouldn't be here if it weren't for wine.
Yeah.
It definitely served its purpose as far as
Yeah, so but the underlying point isn't so much that. It's the fact that this man who never met the companions, who was a persecutor of the followers of Jesus, who never met Jesus, suddenly turns up and says to James the just, Peter and all the rest of the companions of Jesus, that, by the way, you've never met me. I know you know me to be a persecutor of your brothers, but I've just had a vision from Jesus, and he's told me to proclaim the new covenant. And the new covenant is essentially a reversal of the Judaic law. Circumcision suddenly is not circumcision of the body, it's circumcision of the heart. Suddenly, you can eat pig, you can do whatever you want because you're not under the law anymore. So ask yourself something. When we talk about the consistency of narrative, what's more consistent? That the prophets, including Jesus, taught that God is one and can never become a man? Or what St. Paul came along and taught, which was from the Greek concept of God, which was that God can become a man, he dies for your sins.
well, I just believe it was that it's the progression. It's a progression to become and behave in the way that God would want us to behave, worship Him, and through that we grow. And
But it's also blasphemy as well. Think about the blasphemous side of the children of Israel being taught it is a great crime to claim that God can become a man. And then suddenly there's a complete reversal upon this. By them being taught, you almost got it right, but you didn't. God can become a man. So think about truth here and the idea that truth is very, very narrow.
yeah.
Right? It's not expansive, is it? You can't have contradictory. You know, someone comes along and says, "Oh, by the way, it's true that I'm a married bachelor." You're going to say, "What are you talking about? Do you know what married mean, and do you know what a bachelor means?" Someone comes along and says, "Oh, I've discovered a squared circle to be true." You're going to say, "Do you understand what a circle is and what a square is? You can't square the circle, right?" So now suddenly God is teaching God can never become a man, and then one of his prophets, no less one of his great messengers of God, comes along and says, "Well, actually, what, God got it wrong? He can become a man?" This is why Prophet Muhammad is a fulfillment from the line of Ishmael. If you read Genesis chapter 17, God says that he blessed both the seeds of Abraham, both Isaac and Ishmael. He says of Ishmael in 3 separate occasions in chapters 17, 21 and 22 that he will make Abraham a great nation. Now, do you know that through Ishmael's line, the Arabs are the ones that arose? Right, good. Do you know that the Arabs turned out later on down the line to become pagan worshippers, idol worshippers? What would make a nation in God's eyes who knows the future, what would make them a great nation if he knew that they're going to turn out to be idol worshippers?
It's the promise to the people through that line.
Or the only way to fulfill that promise is what God did through Isaac's line. Isaac's line had many prophets and princes. The reciprocation of that would be that God would, in order to uphold the blessings of blessing the both seeds of Abraham's children, that he send a messenger through Ishmael. That the only man in history who openly came out to proclaim, I am a messenger of God, is Muhammad. Muhammad, he said, I am the closest to Jesus, son of Mary, in this life and in the hereafter. So his followers said, O messenger of God, how? So he said, our fathers are different, but our religion is, our father is one, our mothers are different, but our religion is one, and there was no prophet between me and Jesus, son of Mary. So think about it like this. If Muhammad was inspired of the devil, as some people claim, why would the devil do the undevilish task of telling Muhammad that your first commandment is that there is none worthy of worship except God, and idol worship is false? Why would the devil do that? Why would the devil, who succeeded I've got Ishmael's children in my grasp, they're worshipping God in the form of 365 idols and even more. And then suddenly, he inspires Muhammad to rise up and proclaim what all the prophets and messengers that came through Abraham's other line taught. And before Abraham, Noah, right? They taught that God is one and that he can't become a man. So for us, the reason why we find Islam is attractive as a religion is the concept is so easy to understand. All the prophets and messengers taught exactly the same message, not contradictory messages, because this is not the nature of God. God is not the author of confusion, right? You might have heard that from the Bible. And so when God sends his messengers, in the Quran God says that we have sent to every nation a messenger proclaiming, worship God alone and eschew false deities. That includes Muhammad. It is one of the greatest crimes for a Muslim to worship Muhammad. And worship is so strict in Islam that we don't have middlemen like the Catholics do. Because we believe that God is, like you do, like all hearing, all seeing. So all God wants us to do is to be sincere to the truth. And who is the source of all truth? God.
Our Heavenly Father.
Our Heavenly Father. Our Father, hallowed be thy name, not my name.
Right.
Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. So look at Jesus here showing his subordination. For me, when I read the clear proclamations of Jesus in the Bible, I find from the unambiguous statements of Jesus him claiming to be not divine. John chapter 5 verse 30, he says that I cannot of my own self do nothing. I hear as I judge, and my judgment is just. For I seek not my own will, but the will of the one that sent me. For us, this makes Jesus a Muslim. Do you know why? A Muslim is one, by definition, is the one who submits his will willingly and lovingly to God. So the greatest Muslims, by definition, were the prophets and messengers, because they were receiving revelation directly from God. God was communicating with them and purifying them, had purified them. So all the prophets and messengers were Muslims. So Jesus, we believe, if he had a will that's subordinate to the Father, and he worshipped the Father, Garden of Gethsemane, he fell on his face, oh my Father. If he fell on his face, like the Muslims fall on their faces. The Muslims, if you've seen them pray, we're the only ones who follow in the actions of worship of the prophets and messengers. Abraham fell on his face. Moses fell on his face, according to the Old Testament. Jesus fell on his face. Jesus, in John chapter 17, verse 3, he states, and this is life eternal, that you may know the only true God and Jesus Christ whom thou hast sent. So for us, this is a clear statement where Jesus is making himself distinct from the Godhead.
Isn't that wild? That I think that's a pretty incredible thing that is definitely not understood by a lot of Christians, thinking that he's praying to himself, he's doing this to himself.
Precisely.
He's definitely...
We would extend that and say to the Christians that come home to the true worship of God. The true worship of God. Remember, the children of Israel were sent prophets and messengers. Jesus says, some of them you killed, O Jerusalem, that ye kill the prophets, right? And you turn them away. So some of them they killed. Eventually there came a point where, after they beheaded, apparently it is mentioned, John the Baptist, Jesus was the final messenger sent through the line of Isaac, and they rejected him, right? They persuaded the Romans to persecute him. So who is God going to send next? It would be a fulfillment of the line of Abraham. that was Muhammad. And if you have a look at Muhammad's claim, it mirrored what Jesus and the prophets taught, which was worship God alone. Don't worship me. Jesus, in fact, I don't know if you know anything about Islam, Prophet Muhammad taught right throughout his life, constantly emphasizing the true worship of God. On his deathbed, when he was in a state of delirium, he came out of that state and he said, "Curses be upon the Jews and the Christians. They took the graves of their prophets as places of worship." So even on his deathbed, the only thing he was concerned with was upholding the nature of God, the purity and the worship of God. So we believe that our purpose in life is to worship God, and we should be sincere to the truth. The truth can come from any angle, any which way, at any time. The question is, when it does come, are we going to be sincere to it, or are we going to respond like the pagan Arabs during the time of Muhammad's time said, that when it is said to them, "Follow what has been revealed unto you from your Lord," they said, "No, we will follow what our forefathers were upon." So in the Quran, God responds and says, "What? Even though your forefathers had no guidance and they did not use their intelligence?" In other words, just because you're born into a particular way, that doesn't mean that you follow it. Otherwise, the truth would be dependent upon who you follow, who you're born into. The Hindu truth, the Sikh truth, the Christian truth, the Judaic truth, the Muslim truth. For Islam, the truth is Al-Haq, the truth, one of the names of God. Ar-Rahman, the most merciful. But he's also just. So for us, God's justice entails that if we hearken to the message, then we will receive his mercy and his love. But if we don't, there are consequences to this. And the consequences are that we have violated the very nature of God, willfully and purposefully, knowing in our heart that the truth came for me, but I rejected it. So then, once we die, the Quran teaches us what will happen to our soul immediately when we die. So the Prophet Muhammad, one of the reasons why he's the final messenger is because he came with the complete truth. And I believe Jesus hints to this in the Bible. In John chapter 14 and 16, he speaks about the coming of a person after him. He says, "I have yet many things to say unto thee." In chapter 16, verse 7, John, he says, "I have yet many things to say unto thee, but ye cannot bear them now." And then he says, "Howbeit, when he, the Spirit of truth, shall come, he shall guide you into all truth. For whatsoever he shall hear shall he speak, and he shall glorify me." We believe that this was a man, because the Holy Spirit has never been referred to by the pronoun he 9 separate times in the Gospel of John chapter 16. 9 separate times is referred to as he. The reason why that is because the Holy Spirit, pneuma, is a neutral gender. It is neither male nor is it feminine. So he's not referred to as he in the Bible. And the only time this comforter, as Jesus calls him, this man who will come, who will call you to all truth, is a man that we believe is Muhammad. Because
Is he like our concept of the Holy Ghost is Muhammad?
no, we reject the Trinity, because in the Quran God quite clearly says to the Jews and the Christians, most certainly they have disbelieved, who say that God is the Messiah, son of Mary. And then the verse continues and says, if they do not desist from what they are saying, then most certainly paradise will be forbidden for them, and hellfire will be their abode, wherein they will find no helpers. Then the verse continues and says, most certainly they have disbelieved who say that God is a third of three, meaning a trinity. When Jesus in fact told the children of Israel that God is, that worship God, my Lord and your Lord. Then two verses later it says, most certainly the Messiah, Jesus son of Mary, was no more than a messenger, and his mother was a she was a righteous saintly woman. Ummuhu Siddiqa, she was a rightly saintly woman. But then God refutes the Trinity in sublime words. He says, have a look. They both ate food. They both ate food. Have a look. See how clearly we are establishing the evidences against them. Have another look. See how they have deviated away. In other words, if you are claiming that God can become a man, or a woman, or a monkey, or a cow, the consequences are that you eat. And a being that eats has to go to ingest. And this is not the qualities of God. Because if, for instance, God came down in the form of a dove, right, during the baptism, if God can become
I think that was just a sign. I don't think it was a literal. That was meant at all literal. I think it was just a sign that John the Baptist was doing the.
I mean, there's some Christians say that.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So my point here is, again, God turning into creation is a blasphemy. The purity of God's worship has to be that God is independent and distinct from creation. He's the necessary being. He is the one worthy of worship. Everything else is subordinate to him and not worthy of being worshipped.
And not worthy of what?
Not worthy of worship. This worshipping other than God is the greatest crime against God. In fact, in the Quran, God says that the one who dies having associated partners in God's worship, he will never be forgiven. Because it's obvious that the Creator is the Creator and the creation is creation, and never shall the twain meet.
Do you believe that when Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane, that he bled from every pore because of the? You believe that?
For us, there is truth in the Bible,
right?
But there is also
it's translated correctly.
Yeah, precisely. But there's also falsehood therein, and the falsehood has been entered therein by the scribes of human beings over centuries. So, for instance, Saint Paul.
Yeah, we definitely know that. Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with the fact that.
Look, in the Quran, God says. In the Quran, God says.
God is, but as far as it's translated correctly.
Yeah,
I'm not talking so much about language, but.
Well, I'm saying more there. The Quran is actually saying, woe to those, and this is in reference to the Jews, woe to those who write the book with their own hands and say this is from God, in order to gain a little price, in order to make money from it. And then God condemns and says, woe to those who write it with their own hands, and woe to those who acquire a price thereat. What this is indicating is that the Torah and the Injil, though it was in the responsibility of the hands of the people, they changed it. And we don't need to go very far. Look, have a look at Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John. Mark was written, they tell us, in 60 CE. The last of the Gospels was written between 100 to 120 CE. That's over almost 100 years removed from Jesus. So during that time, particularly after the destruction of the temple, when the followers were suddenly dispersed, great tumult, and we're being told that Jesus, this is what they were inspired to do. If you read the Gospel, Jesus actually proclaimed the Evangelion, meaning the one single Gospel. And we believe that this is in the Arabic, Injil, the Gospel. But the people afterwards changed it, like St. Paul writing his letters and entering that into that's not from God. We don't believe that's from God. We believe that St. Paul came with this notion that, if anything, he was inspired by the devil. Because in the Quran, God says, let me recite unto you. No, God says, upon whom do the devils descend? They descend upon every lying, sinful individual. St. Paul fits this criteria because from the own admission of the author of Acts, St. Paul was walking down the road to Damascus to persecute the followers of Jesus. There's no indication of him having repented. And yet he claims that it was Jesus. Well, it could quite easily have been the devil doing the devil's work. Because look, the devil comes along and reverses what the prophets and messengers taught.
So you would categorize that to being, by their works you shall know them, and even though on the surface it looks like Paul did a lot of great things, but you're saying that it was like that, the nine truths and one lie.
I'll give you a counter example. You could have a man who spent his entire life dedicating himself to his people, helping them, the poor, etc. He gets a Nobel Peace Prize, and at the end of each and every night, he goes and worships Ram or Krishna. That won't avail him in the least. That won't avail him in the least, because why? He's violated the most important right upon him, which is the right of God. No one's right is more important than the right of God. So if you, for instance, go home preaching to the people, be good to your mother, and as soon as the door closes, you go home and you beat your own mother, you abuse her, you disrespect her, you throw her into an old people home, that doesn't make your preaching truth. If anything, it makes you a hypocrite. It exposes you if it's found out. Likewise, the person who claims to be doing all this good only to violate the very rights of God, and it's obvious that he's violated his right, then God describes this person, all of his deeds have been negated. So in the Quran, there is a verse that encompasses this notion of rights. Because the Quran, we believe, came with how to establish rights. If you want to define Islam as a religion, it is the establishment of rights. So the verse says, "Come, let me recite unto you what your Lord has forbidden you from." And what's the first and most important thing God has forbidden for mankind? It is the right of God, that you do not associate any partners in his worship. Again, the emphasis on God, his purity of worship. And then the second most important thing is extraordinary. It is that you be good to your mother and father. But the word here, ihsanan, is in the superlative of the language. It means you can't be second or third or fourth best towards them. You have to be the best that you can. And then it says that you do not kill your children out of fear of poverty. Unfortunately, what happened when the pagan Arabs, the children of Ishmael, when they turned away from the worship of God, when you turn away from the truth, what happens? You begin to improvise in life. Right? Like today, people are improvising. Today I identify as a cat, tomorrow I'm going to identify as a woman, and all the rest of it. Right? We don't need to go there, but you get the point.
Yeah, that's a whole other.
That's another ballpark, right?
Because you can pretty much eliminate God's children from ever coming to the planet if you sterilize them in their
Precisely.
or if you abort them.
Precisely.
Just horrible.
Precisely. Now extend that with the rights of God. You could eliminate the very worshippers of God if you do not have the truth. If you don't have the truth, you would end up violating the very rights of God. So the Quran actually came to teach the pagan Arabs who, when the Quran says, don't kill your children out of fear of poverty, this was because the pagan Arab, because they turned away from the truth of God, they began to improvise. And one of the improvisations was this evil act, particularly practiced by the poor amongst them, which was that if you have a baby daughter, she will turn out to be a financial liability, because in their culture, before Islam came to rectify it, the bride side would have to pay an extortionate amount of dowry, and the groom side would take advantage. Now the poor, what are they going to do? So what they used to do, they used to take, just after the baby had been born, if she was a female, they would go and bury her in the sands of Arabia. In fact, one of the first martyr in Islam is a woman. She said that when she had her third child, the hand literally came up from the sand and grabbed her finger whilst she was being suffocated. And she vowed never to. She said that if I ever have a daughter again, I will never subscribe to this idea. So Islam came, the Quran said, why don't do that, because God feeds them and he feeds you. Meaning, why would you do this when your sustenance is directly from God? He's the one that decides. He may turn your fortunes around in the future, and you may become rich, and so therefore she wouldn't be a financial liability. And then the verse continues with various other rights, that you do not commit evil deeds both openly and in secret. Why? Because it's all good doing that out in the open, but the biggest challenge is when you're behind closed doors, and then you have to be pious. And that takes a lot of practice. And then God says, do not kill anyone for whom it is unlawful for you to kill. So Islam is all about rights, but they need to be prioritized. You can't claim to be Mother Teresa or this person or that person, and yet at the end of the night violate God's right and think that you're going to die and God is going to be pleased with you. So one of the ways that the Muslims encourage the Jews and the Christians is to remind them of what Prophet Muhammad said. He said that there is not a Jew or a Christian who hears of my message and accepts it, except that God will forgive all of his sins, and he will take his good deeds and multiply them by a factor of 10 to 700 or even more. Now,
pretty amazing promise.
Yeah. So, but here's the flip side, because God is an all-just God. The Prophet Muhammad warned. He said, there is not a Jew or a Christian who hears of my message and rejects it willfully and purposefully, except that he will be from the dwellers of hellfire if he dies upon that. So in Islam, the incentive is that if you become a Muslim, naturally there will be incentives for the believers in a way that you will not be able to receive in any way, shape or form as a disbeliever. So one of the ways that Islam encourages and shows that God is extremely merciful towards mankind is that if you become a believer, your good deeds could be multiplied more than they're worth. That's why the Prophet said to his companions, none of you will enter paradise on account of your own good deeds. And he included himself. So the companions, they were like, what? By the way, the companions believed Muhammad was the best of mankind. So they said, even you are a messenger of God? Meaning that your past sins, your present sins and your future sins have been forgiven. You're the final messenger of God. Even you are a messenger of Allah? He said, even I accepted the mercy and the mercy of God. Meaning, we can't earn our way into paradise. But there are conditions to God's mercy and love. We have to declare with our lips, whilst believing in our heart. No baptisms or anything like that. It's only between you and your Lord. It's not about me gaining rewards or anything like that. Because my preaching may just be vain. Because God knows what will happen in the future. But the person, if he accepts it and wants to become a Muslim, he merely says, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. It means there is none worthy of worship in truth except Allah, which is the name of God in Arabic. Like Jesus said when he was on the cross, what did he say? Ela lela lama sabaqtani. Ela ela Allah Allah. In Aramaic, God has a name, Ela or Allah. So the Arab Christians before Islam came.
Is that one of the 100 names? Because I don't know.
No, that's the proper noun, the proper name of God. He has other names, but his proper name is Allah, and then he has other names like the most merciful, the most loving, the most the forgiving, the truth, and so on and so forth.
There's like 100 different names. Right?
Yes, 99 names.
99.
Or even more. There's some, the Prophet said, some of which you've been taught, and some of which you don't know, and you'll find out on the Day of Judgment when when you recognize the truth of the unseen world for what it truly is. Then the names that he'll teach you will be significant and applicable to that period. They won't be applicable to us now because we haven't seen God. So the testimony of faith has it that you worship God alone and you do not associate any partners in his worship. And Muhammad Rasulullah, that the only one worthy of being followed is the last and final messenger of God, Muhammad. For the Christian, there's an addition. He has to testify and that Jesus is the slave and messenger of God. Not God, not the Son of God. He is just a slave and messenger, a servant and messenger of God. Just like all the servants and messengers from amongst the prophets. We're all servants and messengers. If a Christian becomes that, all his sins will be forgiven, all his good deeds will be multiplied. He's like a newly born baby. Now, I don't know about you, I would give my left arm to know that my sins have been forgiven and, the slate has been clean. The second pillar of Islam, because Islam is established upon 5 pillars, and they say that if the foundations are built upon strong pillars, then everything thereafter will be solid, right? The second pillar is to pray 5 times a day, just before sunrise, in the early afternoon, in the late afternoon, just after sunset, and in the evening. Dedicate yourself. What this does is that is a proof of your testification, the first pillar. Because in Islam, you can't just claim to be a Muslim and not transform it into action. It has to be transformed into action. In fact, they say that the action is a verification of your faith. That's why if you read the Quran, I'm not sure whether you've read it.
I've got one, and I promise after this discussion that I'll read it.
At the very least, at least you'll go away knowing who your fellow Muslim is, right? Which isn't a bad thing because you're getting rid of ignorance. So this 5 daily prayers, it's a validation of our faith. Because look, imagine waking up in the morning when everyone else is asleep. You're doing it only for one thing alone, yourself and your Creator. You're not showing off.
It's a pretty beautiful thing.
It's a beautiful thing. And so, if you can maintain this through your life, the Prophet Muhammad, he said to one of his companions who asked, "O Messenger of God, if I keep the 5 pillars, Will that be enough for me to enter paradise? The Prophet said, yes. If you've done it sincerely, it will be enough. So the third pillar is that you give 2.5% of your surplus wealth, like whatever you have in your bank, annually to the poor. Annually to the poor. What this is, it's a purification of your wealth. So you're purifying your testification of faith through the prayers, but your purification of your wealth so you don't become niggardly is you've got to give this money away. Whatever surplus you have, you've got to give 2.5% of that. Now, if you don't have surplus wealth, then you're exempt, right? If you're poor, you're exempt. The fourth pillar is the fasting during the month of Ramadan, right? We know Jesus fasted for 40 days. The prophets and messengers fasted. This is a bringing together of the previous three pillars. Because in the month of Ramadan, you fast from sunrise to sunset. Now imagine you give up food for the sake of God. And then behind closed doors, you're having a bit of a nibble, right? This is true faith, because your true faith will be tested if you can truly keep up with it. And you're only doing it for the sake of God, not for anyone else. And they said during the time, during the time of Ramadan, the Prophet, though outside of that month, he was extremely generous. During that month, they said that he would give charity away like the wind, just giving it away left, right, and centre. Why? Because that month is an extremely blessed month. Just like there are moments in the day that are blessed, like the 5 daily prayers. These are blessed moments, which encourages the Muslims to wake up and to worship God during those periods. Likewise, there are moments where God incentivizes the believers to look out for these moments where God says, here is great blessings, more blessings than when it's done outside of that. Then the fifth pillar, if you don't know about this, is going to the Mecca in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Whether you're black, brown, it doesn't matter who you're from, you wear the same type of clothes. You don't know whether the person who's worshipping God is rich or poor. And you go there for a number of days, and it's a great struggle. You worship God, you give charity, but it's also a spiritual way of reminding you of the last and final day, the day of judgment, where God will destroy the world. And in the Quran, if you haven't read it, God goes into detail, telling you exactly how the world will end, what will happen on the day of judgment. He gives a chronological order. Why? Because this is in order to satisfy the believer. If we don't know anything about what will happen to our soul when we die, though we believe in the afterlife, what will happen to my soul when suddenly the pangs of death overtake me? What will happen to my soul?
If you don't make it to Mecca, but you've done everything else.
Yes, there's a condition for that.
Okay.
The Prophet said, if you can afford it. That's the stipulation.
Okay.
If you can afford it, then at least once in your life, go there. If you can't, then the obligation is lifted. So it's all about obligations. So for instance, I remember when I couldn't bend down in my worship, right? I just had a physical impairment in my back. So I just did as much as I can. Good. Because of the verse in the Quran where God says, God does not burden the soul more than it can bear. And I'll come back to this. So the fifth pillar is a representation of the last and final day. Islam came to tell us everything that will satisfy the soul. What will happen to our soul between the point when we die and when we are resurrected? The Christians and the Jews don't know about this. They were only taught what needed to be taught. What will happen when the day of resurrection takes place? How the believers and the disbelievers, they will be sorted. Then the believers will remain. How God will separate the true believers from the hypocrites amongst the believers. Then the believers will be told to cross the bridge. Eventually, the believers will come to the 8 gates of paradise. What will happen to the believers in paradise? There are ranks in paradise. The highest rank is occupied by the messengers of God. And the Prophet described the one who is the lowest as though you're looking at these stars in the sky. But the one who is the lowest, the Prophet said, he will feel as though he has the most. So in other words, the blessings of God for the ones who reach paradise is so great that even the one who's been given the least, he will be so grateful, it will be as if he feels he's been given the most. But then we have the descriptions of hellfire. The levels of hellfire. The lowest level is occupied by the hypocrites. we are told who the person will be in hellfire who will be given the least amount of punishment. Do you know what that is? The Prophet said he will, a hot ember will be held under that man's foot, and it will cause his brains to boil. So it's not a joke that if you know the truth, you violate the eternal God, that you will not be punished for an incredibly long time. Because this is from the justice of God. That He gave you life, as the Quran says, He who gives life and death so that He may test which of you are best in deeds. He's created us to implement His justice. And God is not one who commands people to evil. God in the Quran says that Inna Allah la ya'muru bil fahsha. God does not command to evil. Do you say of that which you do not know? Do you say of God that which you do not know? God has always commanded to good. It's man who, by turning away from God, they begin to improvise, and evil then comes into the world. So God describes mankind. He says to mankind, evil has appeared in the land and in the sea because of what the hands of men have earned, so that they may taste a portion of this evil and return back to God in repentance. The evil is what we earn, you know. And so, one of the ways that the Prophet Muhammad came to encourage or to establish that he is a true prophet is, given that he's a prophet, he tells people about prophecies. The prophets, they told prophecies about the future. Now, one of the prophecies that the Prophet Muhammad taught,
But not like fortune tellers.
no, and exactly, there's a massive distinction because the prophecies have to be clear and
Amos 3:7, right? Surely the Lord will do nothing but reveal
the truth
the truth to us.
to his servants, to his righteous slaves, right? So look at the way the Prophet Muhammad taught us about prophecies of the future. He taught us about the signs of the Day of Judgment, signs that will take place about the Day of Judgment. Now, and there are many, many prophecies, and they're detailed to the point where, rationally, if you go away and look at them, you think to yourself, it's not possible that a man could just guess at this. Some prophecies, have you heard of Nostradamus? Yeah. Have you read his quatrains?
No.
Okay, they're ridiculous because they could fit a number of instances, right? There's nothing detailed about them. They're so vague that you could say, well, that happened that time and at that time and so on and so forth. I'll give you one prophecy that the Prophet said about a time that I believe only fits today and could not have fit at any moment in time prior to today, and when he fought over 1400 years ago, when he actually made this prophecy. The prophecy has it's a dual prophecy. It says that the Day of Judgment will not come until the lands of Arabia return to being green pastures. Now look what it's saying. It says the lands of Arabia will not return to being green pastures. So not only is it affirming that there was a point in the past before him where the lands of Arabia were green, but he's saying that they will return to being green. Now, do you know when the time was when the lands of Arabia were fully green? And I'm not talking about sometimes they become green in the north because of the monsoons.
Thousands of years ago?
Thousands of years ago during the Holocene period, between approximately 7,000 BC. 7,000 BC is when you had hippopotamus, you had elephants, and other aquatic and land-dwelling animals.
Must have been a pretty amazing place.
It was an amazing place, and you can see, if you have a look at the satellite images of Arabia today, you can see literally, like you see the moon or Mars.
Yeah.
Not moon, the Mars more so, because they say Mars now used to have a water, right?
Yeah.
Used to have water. You can see that in Arabia, all over the Arabian Peninsula. Remnants of the past. But no one knew this during the Prophet's time. No one from the past knew this. And the Prophet said it will return to being green. The only time that Arabia is now becoming green is today, because of climate change and global warming, and of course the ingenuity of mankind, right? Human beings being able to funnel in water from afar. Have a look at Mecca. If you look at YouTube, there was literally a deluge coming through Mecca. There was green oasis, huge swathes of them across Arabia. Things that no one could have imagined 50 years ago, let alone during the past. So the Prophet has made a specific prophecy claiming that the lands of Arabia used to be green and they will return to being green. Yes. So he's just given it to you in Arabic. There's another statement where the Prophet said that the day of judgment will not come until the naked barefooted Bedouin Arabs, they compete against each other in the building of tall buildings, in the construction of tall buildings. The only time that the Arabs were in a position of building the Burj Khalifa, and now the Saudis are claiming they're going to make a even bigger one, like 2 kilometers long. I mean, it's insane. The only time that was when they discovered gold, when they discovered what you would call oil, or as they call it, black gold, right? Mm-hmm. Before that, they were literally barefooted, desert-dwelling Bedouins. So the Prophet is putting all of his eggs into one basket, saying they will compete with each other in the construction of tall buildings. Not only that, there are prophecies in the Quran where if this man was inspired of the devil, why would the devil take such a massive risk in exposing this himself and this man that he's supposedly inspiring? In the Quran, when the Prophet came to his people and said, I am a messenger of God, he obviously, at that time, he was going for the jugular. He was telling the pagan Arabs, your worship of God is wrong. And because the pagan Arabs, the leaders, they acquired a lot of money through revenue, because people of Arabia used to come down annually to do the pilgrimage. So, the 365 idols, this was great income for them. And so some of them, they opposed the Prophet and said, listen, if you don't desist from what you're saying, there's going to be consequences. One of his uncles hated him so much that he would follow the Prophet around. If the Prophet said to a person preaching, it's daytime, he would say, no, it's not, it's nighttime. That was the level of his hatred. And his wife was equally hateful. So when the Prophet would be praying, she would come and pour garbage on his back. When the Prophet told his people to gather at a particular place, right? And the context is as follows. They didn't have bells in that time. When there was an emergency, a person would go out of the city onto the mountain and he would say, Ya Sabaha. He would call Ya Sabaha. And the people would suddenly gather because it's an emergency. You could be attacked by an enemy. So they all gathered, and the Prophet, this is the Prophet, this is a man, Prophet Muhammad, who some of them knew to be the truthful and the trustworthy. That was a nickname that they had given to him. So they wanted to hear what he had to say. He said, if I told you that there is an army across the mountains that is going to attack you, would you believe me? They said, yes, for we have never known you to lie. That's the reputation that he had. Now here's the reputation of a true man who's going to be chosen as a messenger of God. Not like St. Paul. The messengers of God, they had pedigree. They came from noble families. They were known to be truthful. So the Prophet Muhammad said, so know that I have come to warn you of a great punishment. Now at that point, Abu Lahab, his uncle, this man that I told you about, you know what he said? He said, in the Arabic idiom, he said, cursed be you, O Messenger of God. Immediately God came to his defense with a revelation. The revelation is a dual prophecy. The revelation was, cursed be the two hands of Abu Lahab and may he be cursed, and his wife will be carrying the fuel of hellfire on her back, meaning it's like a wood, a type of wood. Now here the Prophet Muhammad is claiming to Abu Lahab and his wife, you guys, God is saying, are going to die upon disbelief. Now imagine, I hate you so much, I'll do anything to end your religion. Wouldn't the easiest choice be, okay, you know what, Muhammad, you're claiming that you're receiving revelation from God, the one who's all truthful, right? Yes. Okay. You're claiming that this God has claimed, I'm not going to become a Muslim, and my wife's not going to become a Muslim. All right, you know what? Let me prove you wrong. La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. There you go, I've become a Muslim, right? There you go, I've become a Muslim. The messenger of God's religion would have ended because he would have been shown to be a false prophet. Do you know how long Abu Lahab and his wife lived? A decade. Their hatred was so deeply embedded in the heart that they would rather go to war, the more difficult thing, placing their children and their lives and their wealth on the line, than do the easiest thing possible, which was, I can disprove your religion. But the only one who could have made that prediction and gotten away with it is the all-knowledgeable. So during the time of the Prophet, there were revelations and prophecies that were fulfilled, specific prophecies, and there are many prophecies thereafter regarding what will take place, including the fact that when the Prophet he was being persecuted and his followers had been kicked out of the city, they were literally living in a desert for 2 years, to the point where some of them were dying of starvation, to the point where they were cooking the leather that they had and eating it. Some of them were eating shrubs in the desert, right? 2 years of this. The companions became so despondent that they came to the Prophet and said, "Are you not the messenger of God?" He said, "Yes." He said, "Where is the help of Allah? Where is the help of God? If we're believers, why are we being treated like this?" So the Prophet said that there will come a time where you will be given victory, and a person will be able to travel from Yemen to Syria, and he will not fear anyone except the wolf and himself. Or I can't remember what the final point was. Meaning that there will be safety and the Muslims will be victorious. The Quran also speaks about victory, that ultimately the Muslims will be given victory. And of course the Muslims weren't just given victory, they were able to defeat the two superpowers of their time, the Persians and the Byzantine Empire. No one in history has done that. No one in history in the time period of the Prophet has been able to take on, and slightly thereafter, a few years thereafter, has been able to take on two superpowers and defeat them. In fact, it reminds me of an academic who said, someone being able to do what the Prophet did in this time, it would be like someone, I think he mentioned someone from Greenland or Iceland, I think it was Iceland, taking on America and China, I think it was, or Russia, taking on China or Russia and America and defeating them. Can you imagine that? That's the example. So not only do we have, what time is it? What time is it? Okay. So just to cut a long story short, this is what Islam actually persuades the Jews and the Christians and anyone else, that the Prophet Muhammad was a true messenger of God. So look into his life before it's too late.
Okay.
And maybe one day we might be able to call you our brothers in faith.
Definitely.
For us,
thank you.
no worries. Our faith is not established upon him being a white man or him being a black man.
That doesn't matter.
Brilliant. Because it's all about, in the eyes of God, it's all about your righteous good deeds and your faith. In fact, God says, strive against each other. This is the only striving that's worthy in God's eye. Strive against each other in your good deeds. That's what separates one Muslim from another. That's why in the Quran, if you read it, it constantly repeats, those who believe and do righteous good deeds. Those who believe and do righteous good deeds. Constantly throughout the Quran, because the two are like the soul, the body, mind, and soul.
Well, I appreciate.
Listen, I appreciate your time, my friend. Okay, what's your name? What's your name again?
My name is Jerry.
Jerry, listen, nice one, Jerry.
Nice to meet you.
All the best with your travel home.
Thank you so much.
And if you do get a chance to grab a Quran,
Yes, and I hope God will bless your family and take good care of you.
I appreciate it. And yours too, may Allah guide you and your family as well. Take care. Thank you.
What does John chapter 1 verse 1 say?
That is why.
What does it
That
say?
is why verse 14 says this. Pay attention to this.
Why does it listen to me?
Everyone listening to John chapter 1. He mentioned verse 18. He did not mention verse 14. He did not mention verse 1.
He
did not mention verse. He did not mention verse 2.
So when the Bible
Verse 14 says this.
no one has seen God,
Pay
that's
attention.
wrong. No one see God.
Pay attention to this. Verse 14 says this. And the Word that created everything, and the Word was made flesh and dwelt amongst us. And we beheld the glory.
So God became a man.
The glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and
How
truth.
can God have a father?
It means
How?
you don't
How
believe-
can God have a father?
How many gods there
Tell
are?
me.
You do not
Tell me.
believe in your
Tell me.
Quran.
How can God have a father?
You do not believe in your Quran.
You are a liar.
We do that for the Muslim. So, anyway,
Your
okay,
Quran says
okay.
you should regard the Injil. The Injil says that this is
Okay.
the word of God from God.
Collection of
And you disagree with it.
Collection of
Okay,
books.
come back.
So you do not regard
Okay.
the Injil.
Okay.
You do not regard
We do.
the Torah. You do not regard the Quran.
We do.
You don't.
Tell me, where in the Bible
When
it
it's
says,
comfortable for you,
where in the
you
Bible
accept
it
it.
says, no one has seen God. Is that verse true?
Very true.
So Gospel according to John, chapter 1, verse 18, where in each and every Christian Bible, it says, no one has ever seen God. So that's true. But did
But I
the
want to ask you a simple
but,
question.
did
Let me ask you,
but
is God a spirit?
let me finish.
Finish.
Let me
Is God a
finish.
spirit?
Let me
Is
finish.
God a spirit?
Don't interrupt.
Is God a spirit?
Will you be quiet?
Answer the question.
Will you be quiet?
I'll be quiet if you answer the question.
Will you be quiet?
Keep quiet if you answer the question.
Okay.
Is God a spirit?
How can I answer when you keep...
Answer the question.
So be quiet. So listen.
Let him talk. Let him talk.
All right, tell him to answer the question. Is God a
Actually
spirit?
sexist, Christian.
I'm not saying. I
Yeah,
am
you
very,
are.
very sound of
He
mind.
asked me a
and spirit.
question. He don't let me answer. He keeps going.
Answer the question. Stay
Okay.
on point, sir. Please stay on point.
He doesn't look that. He doesn't use a Kalashnikov. He uses his mouth. Okay. Anyway, so when I gave you the verse,
I asked the question. He's not going to answer the question.
I will.
Going to answer.
I will.
If you patiently listen
You
like
are
he
not
did.
leaving. You are running away. Okay.
And you know I don't like being called you.
No. Let me.
Please answer that
Okay,
question.
will you be quiet?
Is God a spirit?
Will you be quiet? Jesus was never God.
He wasn't.
Why? Because in every
Jesus
Christian.
was both flesh and spirit.
So what Jesus both?
He was both 100% God and 100% man.
But God says, for I am God and not a man.
Man.
Book of Hosea,
Yes.
chapter 11.
That is why.
God says
how many gods
That
there
is why Jesus Christ is not just man. He is God and man.
So in
There's a
Jesus-
difference.
So
How
in
many?
Jesus, so in Jesus.
Two natures.
I'm not talking to
Do
you.
you? Are you?
The Father.
No, let me ask you something.
Okay, no.
Let me ask you something.
Okay,
Do you have the nature of God?
Okay, listen.
Or just the nature of
listen,
man?
no, we are humans.
And that's it.
We cannot be God.
So if there is a non-like human that is not just human, but has 100% nature human and 100% nature God,
Who's that?
are they different from you?
Who's that?
Yes.
Who's that
And
human?
that's Jesus Christ. of
Who's
Nazareth.
that human you are talking about?
Jesus Christ of Nazareth.
So Jesus was a,
And he was also God.
so was Jesus a human?
He was human and God.
How can God be a human and God?
Simple.
Okay, are
The
you
way he
saying-
said it in the Bible.
Who said?
Jesus Christ called him Son, manifest in the flesh, and also called him my God.
So
He said,
Jesus,
no, God, sorry, and also called him God, and told all the angels to worship him.
okay, did Jesus?
And this is God's
Stop,
command.
stop. Did Jesus have the power? Don't rush. Did Jesus have the power to create anything?
He did. That's why it's called the Word.
So-
and in the beginning,
so-
John chapter 1 verse 1 says, the Word, the same Word that was
Okay.
made flesh,
Okay.
created everything.
Okay, so Jesus created everything, yes? In every Christian Bible, in the fourth gospel, gospel according to John. Will you be quiet? In every Christian, you said Jesus.
He's using his age against you. He's
Listen,
using his white beard against you.
listen. What I
He
ask
doesn't
you,
know respect my elders.
you are a disgrace to
Ah, no, I
So stop.
reject it. I
Stop.
reject it. I am a blessing.
Let me speak.
Speak, sir.
Okay.
I am a
You said Jesus was always God, yes?
Absolutely.
And you said Jesus created everything, yes?
Yes, as the word of God, yes.
And you said Jesus, you believe in the Bible, yes?
Absolutely.
And you believe whatever Jesus said, yes?
Absolutely.
In every Christian Bible, knock out words from the Bible. In every Christian Bible,
He doesn't know about the Bible.
will you be quiet?
Go ahead, sir.
Without opening the Bible, I'm going to give you the verse. In every Christian Bible, so you lied. In every Christian Bible, in the New Testament, in the fourth gospel, gospel according to John,
chapter 5, verse 33:0. Jesus is speaking. What does Jesus say? Jesus said, by myself, Jesus said, by myself, I can do nothing. I judge as I hear, and my judgment is just, for I seek not to please myself, but him who sent me. So when Jesus said, by myself I can do nothing, was Jesus speaking the truth? Yes or no?
Absolutely. Telling the truth.
So why did you say that Jesus created everything?
Good. Can I reply now?
Yeah, go on.
Good.
Go on.
Wait.
Go on.
Very important.
Go on. I
do you
can
believe-
talk to one person at a time.
Do you believe in John,
Okay?
the book of John chapter 5?
Don't worry, I don't run away.
Do you believe in the book of John chapter 5?
Go on.
No, I'm asking you, do you believe in it?
I'm a Muslim. Do you believe? What's
in
corrupted?
John chapter 5?
Who's corrupted?
You don't want to use John if you want to use...
No, you're corrupted. Don't you have manners? No, we have have some manners, have some respect. Two people speaking.
Dad, let's be reasonable.
No, you're ignorant. Maybe go back to school. Learn. Okay?
Let's be civil.
So be
Let's be
quiet.
civil.
Come on.
So the question is this.
Yes.
You've quoted John chapter 5, isn't it? And verse, I think verse 38 or verse what?
You're the Christian, you don't know?
No,
Why did you?
I know, but...
why don't
but-
you listen?
No, but I like to be precise.
I quoted Gospel according to John, chapter 5, verse 30,
Verse 30.
where Jesus said, in each and every Christian Bible, Jesus said, by myself I can do nothing.
Good.
I judge as I hear, and my judgment is just.
Truth.
For I seek not to please myself, but him who sent me.
Absolutely. Now I want to ask you a very
Is that verse
I
true?
have asked you very true.
Go.
But I want to ask you a very
So
important-
Jesus can't create anything.
Wait.
So why you say Jesus
Wait.
created everything?
Wait.
Go.
You know, first and foremost, you are missing out some very big chunks. So it automatically means you believe everything in John chapter 5.